Hi, my name is Sarah. I'm a mindset mastery coach, transformational hypnotherapist, and attachment style specialist. In today's video, we're talking again about the fearful avoidant. We're talking about the fearful avoidant. Do they miss you? The truth about fearful avoidance after a breakup, because this is different than a dismissive avoidant. And a lot of you have asked, please do more videos on fearful avoidance. Well, as a healing fearful avoidant, or fearful avoidant in recovery, as I like to say, I can definitely give you some insight on what they're feeling. And I'm going to say one word, in one word, I can sum it up: conflicted and confused. Or that's 3 words. Conflicted and confused is how they're feeling. But I'm going to break it down a little bit more for you in this short video. And so if you're waiting for them to come back, you are not alone. But what they're feeling might not be exactly what you think, and I'm going to explain that here. If you'd like a one-on-one session, I'm open to discovery calls. I was booked up for a while, but now I have openings through May and into June, and you can book in the link below. There's a link to my calendar as well as a website where you can learn more about me. And stay tuned, guys. Like, make sure that you're, watching, and make sure you're subscribing, because I have an online course coming up here soon, as well as a live course that I'm launching this summer, likely next month, either June or July. I'll know more as soon as I have more details. I've got to do some audio recordings, but as soon as that's up and running, guys, that content is going to be yours. It's going to be amazing. So back to this. Does the fearful avoidant miss you post breakup? Well, yes and no. They miss you, and they're terrified of the fact that they miss you. They don't want to be vulnerable. They don't want to have to rely on something outside of themselves. They're desperately trying to create self-love. Like a really aware fearful avoidant is aware that they have this tendency to sort of like hook into something, that push-pull dynamic, and then pull away. And it's painful for both them. It's not just painful for you as a partner. It's also very painful for the fearful avoidant to do that. I can tell you from experience. My husband was incredibly confused for most of our marriage, but I was also confused. I didn't know why I was doing that. I will also say this as a disclaimer, that he presented himself, he's a dismissive avoidant, presented himself, as most DAs will do, as very secure and really ready just to like dive right in. He was ready for marriage. I'm ready to settle down. I'm ready to be a husband. And in some ways, he was a great husband. And he was definitely ready for that and very stable. DAs will be very stable. They'll typically make good money. They have this interesting relationship with money that's not actually very healthy usually. They're very logical, and they're thinking about practical things because those things are safe. Those things don't require them to go into their emotions. But what I will say is that when it comes down to like the nitty gritty of emotional depth and emotional intimacy, intelligence, and connection, they really lack that because they never learned how to form that. Emotional intelligence can be taught, and it can definitely be created later in life, but you have to understand that you're deficient in it, first of all. But can't remember where I was going with that. So let's go back. Let's get back on track. So you're wondering if your fearful avoidant misses you. And this is what I'll say about that. They definitely miss you, but will they reach out again? There's a likelihood of that. Much higher chance and likelihood of a fearful avoidant reaching out than a dismissive avoidant. Dismissive avoidant is much more likely just to go into hiding. They're hiding from themselves. They're hiding from the pain. They're hiding from having to process the pain that they caused you and the pain that they feel, because that would be a domino effect and require them to feel all the pain from all the breakups and all the losses and everything they've felt in their life that hurt them, including going back probably to first grade when they were bullied or whatever the experience was. Mom or dad wasn't very nice. Something happened. It's incredibly painful. They have shut it off. That feels safer than actually going to that place. And if you're holding up a mirror, like I know I did to my husband, I know he did to me, then they're terrified of you. Doesn't mean they don't love you, and it doesn't mean that they don't want to be with you. It means they don't know how to be with you. Those are different things. So it's very complicated with a fearful avoidant. It's not as straightforward as with a dismissive avoidant. It's a complicated answer, but it's not entirely hopeless. You have a much higher chance of being able to reconcile with a fearful avoidant than you do a dismissive avoidant. So fearful avoidants don't grieve all at once. So that's similar to a dismissive avoidant, except with a DA, it's more like they're not grieving at all for like a year or 8 months or something like that. But with a fearful avoidant, they are grieving, but it'll sort of be a push-pull dynamic within themselves. They'll grieve a little and then they'll be like, nope, we're not doing that. Then they'll grieve a little and then they'll pull back, right? Because they're trying to figure out what's safe for their nervous system to be able to handle at one time. So they'll suppress their pain, but then it'll resurface in waves. but usually after you started moving on. In particular, if they know that you've started dating again, or maybe you just stop reaching out or you block them, that can be incredibly painful for an FA because they're relying on that as some source of like connection to you. They want to keep the connection alive. And you'll see that with an FA. They definitely will do things to keep that connection alive and make sure that it doesn't die. And that'll include reaching out to you, sometimes randomly, and usually with a little more emotion than you would get from a DA. So yes, they miss you, but their version of missing is also tangled up in shame, regret, and deep-seated fear. If there's been any sort of betrayal, if you cheated on them, they will be very reluctant to like let you know that they miss you, to let you know that they might want to reconcile. Or I can say from experience that it's even been hard for me to tell my husband. I've written him so many letters and I haven't sent them. I've wanted to have conversations and there's a fear. Now that fear is justified because I'm dealing with a DA who's got into like bear hibernation mode, who just kind of locks everything away and goes on like everything's fine and nothing happened. And when I have tried several times in a couple, maybe like 3 separate instances in the past 8 months where I've tried to open up, I'm met with shutdown, or I'm met with shutdown, then he opens up and then he'll shut down immediately after that the next day. And that's just too painful for me as an FA. So I've chosen not to put myself in that situation. Doesn't mean I don't care, and doesn't mean I don't want to have that conversation. It just means I don't really trust how to approach this person. I don't trust that I won't be hurt again. So you have to, so please hear me out on that as an FA. We don't want to be hurt. We're trying to eliminate the chances of, or the probability of getting hurt more, because it's really painful. We're actually really sensitive individuals. So here's some examples. Your fearful avoidant ex or partner might watch you silently, similar to a DA. They might send short, kind of strange texts, as I mentioned, like out of the blue, like random texts. Like I sent my husband, we had been separated. I had moved across country, and I was like, hey, I want to make those Brussels sprouts. How do you make them? Well, I could have figured it out. I could have found a similar recipe online. It was an excuse for me to reach out to him. Of course, I don't think he realized that, but that's what that was. And I did that especially in the beginning because I wanted to try to maintain some sort of connection while he was trying to, push the connection away to make it easier for him. So what's easier for a DA is to push you away. What's easier for the FA in those initial breakup stages is to maintain some sort of connection with you, because then they feel like all hope is not lost. They might even hover without fully re-engaging. You know what I mean? Like they might just be around. You might hear from friends and family. They might show up at, your favorite coffee shop, kind of creepy, right? Like the FA creeper lurking in the shadows. But they're doing things that feel safe. They're making sure that they're doing it from somewhat of a distance so that they still feel safe and contained within themselves. So it's not manipulation. There's some form of emotional paralysis going on, and their nervous system is responding to the fear of betrayal. And it doesn't have to be cheating, by the way. It can be a betrayal of trust in some way. It can be that, they thought they could count on you and then they found out they couldn't. It could be that with a DA, like I know me, with my husband, it was like, my fear was, I'm afraid to go deep because I'm going to be left there in the deep end of the ocean by myself with nobody to rescue me. What if the waves get too intense, right? What if my emotions, aka waves, get too intense and there's nobody there to hold me? And that's what I really needed and wanted, was somebody to be able to be there and really just meet me where I was at emotionally. So I never felt like I could fully open up, and definitely not in the aftermath after he had asked for a divorce. So there's a form, it is emotional paralysis, especially within the confines or container of a relationship. That's why you'll see, even in the course of a day, you can see an FA go from avoidant to anxious or anxious to avoidant. Lots of times it can look kind of bipolar, but it's not. It's an attachment system. It's an adaptation to childhood, to trauma, typically to some major trauma that occurred, but also fearful avoidant that can form in childhood as a result of parents being addicts of some kind, active addicts. And it doesn't have to be here's the thing about active addiction. It doesn't have to be that the parents were falling all over themselves drunk or, using heroin right in front of the kid. It could just be that they were never really emotionally there because they had this addiction. and oftentimes, especially with alcohol, it's sort of a hidden addiction. There's a lot of shame, so that they were brought up in a household with a lot of shame, and they were made to bury their own shame. So just like ADA, an FA carries a lot of shame, there's a lot of fear, and there's a lot of regret for how they acted. I still have so much that I would like to say to my husband, but I just don't think that it's I don't feel safe to do it. Am I still fearful avoidant? Yeah, I think I will always have that tendency. And I'm not saying that out of negativity. I'm saying that because I think that to a certain degree, you have your attachment style, and then you work on going back to secure. You work on getting back to the middle. I don't think there's like a cure. I don't think you will always be secure, especially if you've had some form of trauma or neglect in your childhood. I think, and from my understanding of it and what I've studied and the courses I've taken, is that let's say an anxious and avoidant get together. The anxious person is going to always have to do a little more work to bring that avoidant person around. Do you want to do that? I don't know. I don't. I know that I don't. I know that I want to work on becoming the best, most secure version of myself. And in doing so, as you do that, you're going to attract in that healthier mirror. You're going to attract in someone. Okay, so let's say you're fearful avoidant. Or anxious ambivalent, and you want to attract in a more secure partner. Well, become a more secure anxious, become a more secure fearful avoidant, and then you can attract in, maybe you'll attract in a dismissive avoidant, but someone who is, pretty healed, but just sometimes goes to that place, but has awareness. If you both have awareness of your adaptations and your kind of need to go, like the need to avoid, the need to become anxious, then you can have an avoidant who knows how to soothe their partner who becomes anxious, or you can have the anxious person who's like, wow, I'm being a little much. Let me just step back and give you some space. So these relationships can work given that both people are aware of the dynamic, are aware of their own triggers and patterns, and really the neurobiology of attachment style and why you are this way. And that means coming to terms with what happened in your childhood, which can be incredibly painful, because a lot of people think I had the perfect childhood until they actually get into it. And we'll just have a conversation sometimes in the first session, and they're like, wow, I really didn't have that perfect childhood. And it's hard to admit that, especially if you have mom or dad on a pedestal. But understanding your own sense of self, understanding your history, your personal history, not just in relationships, but as a child growing up, and what you endured and what you were surrounded by, that kind of negativity, what stories you were told, what were the seeds that were kind of planted in you that became your truths, right? We hold these truths to be self-evident, but they're not those are not your truths, those are other people's truths. So if you're stuck waiting for a message that never comes, you're probably more so dealing with a dismissive avoidant. Now, I have heard stories of pretty extreme fearful avoidance, especially if they lean dismissive avoidant, that will run away and never come back and will just discard. But typically with, especially middle of the road fearful avoidant, fearful avoidant, you will experience their return. They will return. It's been really hard for me. The only time that I ever just totally disconnected was when I was dealing with somebody who I labeled at the time as a narcissist, who actually got a diagnosis of sociopath a couple years later. Go figure. And I did sever all ties. And I'm not here to say what he is. I think it was major unhealed trauma, but what he had done was incredibly destructive, and he showed no sense of remorse. And sometimes it can feel that way with a DA, even, that they're showing no remorse or regret. But I know for me, I did see signs of that from my husband, and I, he's human, and we're all human, and we're all just trying to survive this. It's really difficult relationships, and it's not something we're taught in school. It's something we should have been taught in school, what a healthy relationship looks like, healthy relating, healthy communication, a healthy dynamics, what to do when you're triggered, how to heal childhood trauma, all of this stuff. Shouldn't that be taught in schools instead of trigonometry that we're never gonna freaking use again? I don't know, just a thought. Anyway, so does the fearful avoidant miss you? Yes. I can almost guarantee that, yes, they miss you. How are they going to show that? It might be in some tricky, kind of sneaky, kind of shady ways, but they do miss you. But their fear can be bigger than the missing, okay? Their shame can be bigger than the missing. Their regret they might just sit with that and just bury that. So remember, it is an avoidant adaptation. So they do have the tendency to kind of go within themselves and try to figure it out and work on it. And chances are you'll hear from the fearful avoidant at some point. But what kind of work have they done? How self-aware are they? And do you think that they're a healthy, viable partner at that point? That's up to you to decipher and decide by becoming the most secure version of yourself. Guys, if this has helped you, please do like, share, subscribe, leave a comment, and help me grow this channel. Help me get the message out to other people who can benefit. Look forward to seeing some of you guys in private sessions. I so look forward to seeing you guys also on my Patreon. I just relaunched my Patreon, so go check that out. And in the courses, the summer course, whether you choose to do it at your own time, do the online course version, which will be just as amazing, or you want that live group feeling connection, then we're going to launch either in June or July. So stay tuned, and thank you so much, guys, for being here today. I hope that I have been able to just alleviate some of your fears and give you some deeper insight into how a fearful avoidance mind works.